number one, thank you very much for being with us, for creating this piece. The piece is actually a processor. Processes the piece. What can you tell us about this idea?
Okay, so maybe just to say that it was not a process at first. It was not thought as a process, but it appeared that the process was going to be the best way to achieve it. So the idea was, let's say, had a few different inspirations. One of them, so they don't really look like the piece. That's what I find interesting with it. It's that it's not about aesthetic relationships, but more about ideas. So one of the first is Tom Johnson, who made these very mathematical and expectable pieces of totalities. In fact, so all the chords you can have in one octave, or all the combinations you can have with this kind of scale, for example. And so I was interested in this music that says something true, so that you can evaluate art also not just about what is beautiful or what is effective, but about what is true effectively. So this is a tricky question, obviously, but I wanted to, because I mean, art's role is not maybe to answer it, but just to maybe try to play, at least play with it, and then maybe find something. But for now, I don't know what we have found. Maybe we'll have to wait for the premiere, or I don't know. And
well, we don't know either, because we don't even have the score for concert.
Yes,
so that's
of course, yes.
Funny thing.
I should write it for the occasion. Maybe another inspiration was a painter, a French painter that is called Claude Rutot. He has a few pieces also in the MAMCO in Geneva, and one of them is really interesting for me because it's in fact some kind of physical repertoire of all of his work. So his work is text-based, so he's going to, for example, ask you to paint a wall the same color as a monochrome. And so everything is text-based, and so you don't need him to do it. But what you have to do then, if I got correctly what he asks, is that in the museum, in the MAMCO in Geneva, there are some kind of canvases that have certain specificity. For example, it's paint, not paint, or unpaint. I believe it's the three categories. And so each one reflects the state of one of the works that can be done also everywhere. So you have like a very close relationships between, let's say, this installation and the rest. And so there is also a relation of truth that I'm interested in. And then maybe on the more aesthetic side, what gave me also the idea, I think it was the input, was this Robert Morris piece, like Box with the Sound of Its Own Making. And so I obviously for a physical object, it's very simple to imagine what is the making of the piece. And obviously you have also various kinds of difficulties, because the wood is also the box. And so where do you begin to calculate the totality? And that is also the one of the, for me, interesting questions about this piece. That if we had to really go to the totality of the actions or the sounds that were made to produce or implement another piece, we would have maybe to record all sounds, because obviously for a musician, maybe all the sounds that led to this moment were all the sound he made in his life, including speech also. So in fact, with totalities, you always have to be arbitrary. So this is also something about the Johnson that we could criticize with Johnson, that in fact he speaks of completeness, but it's always very constrained completeness with very strict rules. So you always have to decide. And so this was also a hard part in the piece, because this might be also this interview could also be included maybe in the documentation and in the sounds that were produced in order for this piece to exist. So
because everything is part of the process, and the life of artists is not only on the stage, isn't it? It's you live the performance, and your piece is actually also on the border of performance. So these things become very important and very actually interestingly very much connected to we are currently what we are currently discussing as an ensemble or working on as an ensemble.
Yes, of course. I think also what is interesting is, and I like this part of the piece also, that it's still a concert.
Yes.
It's not an installation, for example, because it
because you gave it the frame, isn't it?
Yes.
The 25 minutes of
yes,
and the stages, right?
and then it becomes really a piece, and not because
Yes.
if it was, for example, an installation, I also thought maybe of doing way more, for example, 3 hours of rehearsals with people,
Yeah.
with everyone at the same time, for example, and not having like overlayings of solo meetings.
Yeah.
That could have been interesting also as an installation, because I mean, 4 hours or 3 hours of field recordings of repetitions maybe a bit too much. But
I think also a very interesting idea of your piece, and I'm very thankful for it, because as we just spoke before, the part of the project's idea, the part of the distillery project idea is workshop, and also we put this question, you know, how much in the process is the workshop and how much performance in itself, and big part of this whole thing is also, let's call it reading session, you know,
Yeah.
like talk with composer, what can you actually do today. And as I said to all composers, I'm extremely happy this year that everybody came closer to this idea of delirium, that each project is actually search for a new form, you know, and the pieces became quite conceptual. And your piece in its process, in this recording protocol, is in itself actually well planned reading session with composer, isn't it?
yes, and so this was also the idea, because for example, I remember having composed a string orchestra piece once, and I was a bit younger, and we had a lot of techniques, and so the guys came and just showed us everything, and it was great to see how much you could do with one instrument, and in the end you had to limit yourself. I must say I've been traumatized in Darmstadt sometimes of the lack of restraint some people can have, and in fact it became in the music I did a bit later something I would fight for and just try to find the minimum. And so this is maybe something where I get out of this and show the maximum without using it. Maybe it's another way of treating material, but I think it's an interesting also question in new music now in general.